All right, everybody. AirDNA just gave Rentalizer a facelift, and it is extremely improved from where it was before. I used to be stead hard against the Rentalizer projections, and technically I still am. But with the way this new tool works, it allows you to be able to customize the comps. And when you can customize them, you can get the exact right properties in there. And when you have the right properties in there, you get the right projections, and you're kind of good to go. So this tool, the new way it's set up, it is actually grabbing some pretty strong comps, but it doesn't know everything that you're planning on doing with the property, all of the key features of the property, because Airbnb doesn't track everything. And so you still have to go through the process of trying to find the most comparable properties to your property. And thankfully, we can do that with a lot more confidence now based off of the way this tool has been built out. Okay. So I was going to create a video where I just showed you the changes and kind of walked you through this, but honestly, it's extremely user friendly. You can, if you played around with it for 15 minutes, you'd figure it out. And so instead, with this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually try and predict the annual revenue of this property using the Rentalizer tool to be able to find the most comparable properties. And I'm going to walk you through that entire process using Rentalizer. All right. And I'll try and teach you all the little tips and tricks as we go through to make sure that you understand exactly how to use it as well. All right. With that being said, let me grab the address here and let's get going. So right at the top, we have this search bar. And if you just pop in the address, there's going to be Rentalizer, Revenue Calculator, Rentalizer. And you can just click that and it's going to bring you right to the Rentalizer tool. Okay. For anyone who doesn't know the Rentalizer tool, it's a way to be able to project the annual revenue number automatically using AirDNA. However, please do not just take this number and run away with it or go buy a property based off of it, and don't use it as gospel, okay? Because we have to do a little finagling here with these customized comps to get the right number. So with that being said, the very first thing you can see is it did pull in the address, but it has it as a 2-bedroom, 2-bath with 4 guests. However, this property is a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, okay? And so what we're going to do is go over here and turn this into 4 bedrooms. We're going to make it 3 baths, and I'm going to make it 12 guests, okay? Because that tends to be the number that people have when it comes to 4 bedrooms. And when I do that, you can see the annual projected revenue has just jumped up to $75,000. Can I rely on that? No, because there's a lot that we need to go through here to figure this out, okay? But there's a bunch of other things here, like a financial calculator. There's the monthly revenue, which helps you see what your cash flow will be on a month-by-month basis. You can also see what the annual projected revenue was over time. We can spend some time looking at that stuff later. But with all that being said, what you want to do here is just jump straight over to customizing the comps, because everything else is a waste of time unless you are just ensuring that the comps you have in here are truly the best possible comps to have. All right. Now, in this section here, we can see we have my comps, and it's pulled in 8 different comps. It's projecting the revenue around 77,000. And there's a couple of other things which I'll get into in just a moment. Okay. If I scroll down a little bit, we can see that we have available comps. So these are other properties that they did not add into my comp set, but are properties I can take a look at personally to see if they would fit into my comp set or not. Now, with that being said, there are 2 things here that I find super helpful when it comes to finding comparable properties using this new tool. And what we can see are these filter options right up here. If you're comfortable with AirDNA at all, you'll probably recognize these. If I click this open, you can see I can customize it by the number of bedrooms, how many people are going to be there. In other words, what I can do is I can remove data that is not comparable to my property right from the get-go. With that being said, I've been playing around with the tool, and I've actually realized that it's pretty good at only pulling up properties that would be considered comparable. In other words, like the bedroom count is relatively the same size, the the number of guests, like all these things are relatively similar. And so I actually feel like I don't need to use this, and maybe I only need to use it in certain markets or certain scenarios. So for today's example, I'm actually just going to leave that off. However, when it comes to the performance, I'm absolutely going to use this. And that's because if you know me, I'm very diligent about ensuring that I'm only using good Airbnb data. And so one of the ways that I can make sure that we're working with good data is by ensuring that the property is a full-time property, and it has been tracked by AirDNA for almost a full year. And so this days available piece right here is a great tool to be able to remove any property that hasn't been either listed for over 271 days or is available for over 271 days. And so if I can find one in this, only look at the properties within this range, I've already removed a ton of data that I personally consider not useful. Okay. If we scroll a little further down, there's also the review count. I also like to remove anybody that has less than 20 reviews, because if you have less than 20 reviews, you are most likely not a full-time operator. And so therefore we're going to get rid of that noise. Now, there's still one more thing I would have to manually do, and that's actually check the reviews on a monthly basis, ensuring that there's at least 1 to 3 reviews every single month for the past 12 months. And then I'll know for sure I'm looking at good data. With all this being said, an actual true time frame to figure out what I would believe the revenue to be for this property would take me well over an hour to do that. I'm not going to go through every single last step, but I'm going to do a lot of the top level stuff that you will see as we go through. Okay. With that being said, we've just added in these filters. We've now removed a lot of noise. If you can see here, we actually have a lot less these pink dots, which are the available comps, that are now showing. And that's because they didn't meet our criteria of good data. Okay. So super helpful in by being able to do that. The next thing that is very interesting is that if I were to just click and drag around here, the available comps on the bottom left actually update in real time as I go through them. And so give me 1 second. It's not loading for me. I can't seem to scroll further down. So let me collapse this for some reason. Oh, there's only 2. That's why. So what I'll do is let me zoom out a little bit more so we can get some more comps in here. And what you can see is that this changes as I move around the map. That's actually intriguing to me. You know why? Because instead of just having this tiny little area that they've decided is where I should look, I can actually move around and find comps all around the area where I think would be comparable. So what do I mean by that exactly, right? I've personally never been to this area, but I can clearly see that it's just outside of Dallas and Fort Worth. So I'm assuming this is, one of those vacation towns for the people that live within that market. And when I look at this area, I can see that there seems to be a couple of towns, right? We've got like Canyon Creek over here, Canberry, some different areas. You get the idea. And what I'm thinking to myself is that there's probably not a gigantic difference if I'm here compared to, over here, any of these areas. However, if you remember when AirDNA first had this loaded, and you can even see where the purple dots are, they're only showing me properties from this really small area and not instead all of these different areas along the water. Now, the reason this is important is because the property we're going to be looking at, and I'll go more in depth on this in just a moment, this property is waterfront, right? And if we have a waterfront property and then there's another one further down here, it's also waterfront, I want to be able to take a look at that data and see if it's comparable or not to my property. And on top of that, okay, I believe I know how to put together a really good listing. And a lot of other people don't know how to put together good listings. And a lot of the comps that they're comparing me to, I would consider them to be properties that are not at the same level of the Airbnb game that I would be playing at. And so then therefore they're not comparable to me. So therefore I have to hunt a little further along this coastline to be able to find properties that I would consider to be more comparable. Okay. So with all that being said, those are 2 features that are extraordinarily helpful for me to be able to find the best possible properties. Before we can actually go hunting for the best possible properties that we want to add to our comp set here, you guys have to actually know what this property looks like so you can see why it would compare one property to the other one. All right. So give me 2 minutes to walk you through this entire property so you now have it engraved in your brain. And then as we go and look at the other comparable properties that are along the coastline, you will see why I consider them to be comparable or not. All right. So we're looking at a really cool looking A-frame, right? Gotta love A-frames. They're the coolest of the cool. We got windows all the way around here as well that look out to the water, which is a huge benefit. The whole place is painted black, which is awesome as well. You can actually buy this property completely furnished. So we can actually get all the furnishings that are in here, which is, in my opinion, designed pretty well. I like the look and the style and the feel, even the bedroom. So, why would you not just kind of keep it as is and add some touches to it? As you can see, it all looks good. The interior, the one thing to call out here, it's got a really small interior space in comparison to some of the properties we're going to look at. This is it, right? So you have your bedrooms and this and the kitchen and obviously the bathrooms, but common space, meaning like places where people can hang out. if there are 12 people in this little room right here, it's going to feel a little crowded in comparison to some of the other ones we're looking at. So I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind the entire time. Additionally, we can see that once we go down these steps here, we're right at the water. So our yard space is actually quite small on that side. But once we scroll a little further over, you can actually see we have quite a bit of space out this way that we could potentially use. Okay. Now, the other thing to this is you have to think, what are you going to do? Sorry, one other thing to mention, it does have a dock. Now, what I'm thinking about with this property is that yeah, it's got that cool factor to it. The A-frame is giving it the cool factor. However, it doesn't have a hot tub, and I guarantee a hot tub can make a difference here. And it also doesn't have a pool. And based off of some of the data that I've been looking at, I think a pool is going to make a difference. You're going to see what I mean when I go through this. Now, obviously, there's no room to add a in-ground pool here because of the water being right there. But my thought is, well, can we add one of these mod pools that has a little see-through thing right here? And could we add it directly right here up along the deck? Could that actually happen? I think we could maybe figure out a way to do that. Maybe we can't, and that's okay. But for the sake of this analysis, I'm going to assume that we could figure it out. Okay. So I'm picturing a mod pool right here. It's got a window that looks out to the water. It'll look super, super nice in the photos. And somewhere over here, we can add in a hot tub somehow, some way. Maybe we add it up over here, and maybe we'll just kind of add a couple of other little long games and things like that. But for the most part, we're just going to be adding those two key things. And now we've got a really cool A-frame with a mod pool and a hot tub. Okay. And now we've got the complete package, in my opinion. So with all that being said, you now know what the property looks like. And now we can actually figure out which properties it compares to. Okay. And so in this, the first step that I would do here is take a look at the properties that they are comparing me to. Because why would I not? They grab the most closest possible properties that are comparable. Let me open them up and take a look. And so you have to click, you can click pretty well anywhere right here. And I'll click here. This is going to pop open. And the first thing I'm going to do is just go straight to Airbnb. And I'm going to go take a look at the Airbnb listing. But before I go take a look at the photos, I'm always going to take a look at the reviews. Again, trying to ensure that there's at least 1 to 3 reviews every single month for the past 12 months. If there's 1 month missing during slow season, no big deal. All right. So we click into these photos and we try to see how comparable is this listing to ours. The first thing you're going to notice is that the interior space is way larger. They've got this whole space. They got that whole space too. With that being said, we still have that A-frame, design and look to it, which could potentially help. We look at, there's just in general, this property is going to just be much larger. Even the yard space is much larger, but they don't have a pool. They don't have a hot tub. They have a dinky game room. The photos really aren't that interesting. So it's good. It's also got a dock. We have a dock. It has a lot of the same key features that we have, but it's not really like designed extremely well. It's just big, and obviously big helps. So it'd be hard for me to look at this and be like, yeah, we're going to dominate this property. But with that being said, I still think it's fairly comparable. So I'm going to leave it in there. The next thing I would do is go to the next property, and I would continue this process over and over again, really trying to thoroughly vet this. But the reason I want to click this one is because watch what happens. I click in here, the listing doesn't open up. This happens. It is what it is. It is not, there's nothing wrong going on with that. It's just that for whatever reason, this host took down their listing, or maybe even Airbnb took down their listing for a time period and they got penalized. But Airbnb doesn't update every hour on the hour. And so then therefore it's not showing up in the actual listing right now. So that is not a big deal whatsoever. However, we can't use this data because I can't look at the reviews to see how many reviews they have over the past 12 months. And so what I'll do is go over to the little trash can here and get rid of it. And it's that simple. Okay. And so what I would do is I continue this process over and over and over again as I go through each of these different individual listings. Now, what you'll notice is that the actual listing is actually already populated in here. You can see it's making $88,000. However, I'm going to add a pool and a hot tub. And I also think I could maybe manage it a lot better. And then if you even look at the this specific listing and we scroll down over here, you can see that the occupancy is extremely low during 4 months out of the year, where not all the listings are in that same scenario. So even though this is telling me that it's been making, it has a revenue potential of 88,000, I'm going to leave it in as a comp set, but I'm going to go out and hunt for some more properties. And so I know I want a pool within, I want the properties I'm comparing to, I want them to have a pool. And so what I'm going to do is go to this amenity piece here. And this, by the way, I just want to call out, doesn't always work, but for this scenario, I am going to use it. And I want to say, I only want to see properties that have a pool. Okay, let's see how well this works. Then I'm going to scroll out and I'm going to move further down the river. And so what I'm looking for are properties that have a pool that are also waterfront. And what we can see right off the bat is in this title, we can see pool, we can see pool, we can see pool. This one has a pool as well. And so what we want to do is click into these and see how comparable is this property really to ours. All right. And starting to get a feeling of should we add this comp set or not. And again, always check your reviews first. But for the sake of this, I'm just going to scroll through. We can see right off the bat that this property is a 5-bedroom with 4 baths. It's got an in-ground pool. We don't have an in-ground pool. It's got a game room. It's designed well, but not like, super well designed. But it's all in all, it's a pretty solid property. They got a good amount of space. Honestly, when I look at this, I think, okay, they got a pool. I know that we're not going to be as big, but I still think it's fairly comparable, maybe like the complete top end of what we could potentially do. I think like way up there, it's like that top end of what we could do. So I'm going to add it, but I don't think it's 100% what we can do. But I'm still going to add it, at least for this mark, so that it's in my comp set. And when I move the map around again, I don't lose it. Okay. And I can then make the decision afterwards if I want to remove it. And let's just say that I popped open all these ones with the pools and I decided, you know what, we're going to add each one of these as we go through. And then I now have all these properties in here with pools and without pools. But what I would have also done is scroll down these ones that are lower down here, and I would have seen, do I think that this property is even worth having in my comp set, yes or no? And what I would have decided is that, this property is just not on the same level of the property that I'm going to put together between the design, the amenities, the decor, the furniture, all these different things. I think I can really trump this listing through and through. Even the listing as is already trumping this one. And so then therefore, that's not going to be a very comparable property to my property. Now, before I do this, okay, before I get rid of these comps, I want to point something out here. And I don't know for sure this is going to work because it's already screwed up on me. But right here where it says confidence score, you can see medium. And I'm sure that was one of the first things you saw. And you're like, what does that mean? Now, there's a whole page you can click to learn more about this. And I strongly recommend just giving a read through. But essentially, what this is telling you is that when you get a high confidence score, it's because the properties that you've added as your comps are all relatively within a same general range, meaning that there's a lot of properties all performing around that same amount that you consider to be comparable to your property. And that makes them feel a lot more confident that you actually are going to be able to hit that revenue number. The wider that range, so if you have if my worst property here is doing 41,000, the top one's doing 160,000. And that's such a big range that AirDNA is like, I don't know, you got such a huge range here. How am I supposed to, I don't feel super, super confident that you'd be able to do that. Right. And so then therefore the bigger the range and the less comps you have, the lower the confidence score gets. Okay. And if you have less than 5, I believe it's always going to show up as low. And so you want at least 5 comps. You want them to try and be within that specific range. Some markets you're going to be able to do that because there's a ton of properties. Other markets, you're just not going to be able to do it. And it kind of is what it is. But they're just trying to give you a bit of a sort of metric or a way of thinking about this to feel more confident about the revenue projection that you're going to be seeing here. So I think this is going to work. I think we'll get it up to high as I do this, but let's see. So I'm going to get rid of all these ones in the 40 because I just don't think that they're comparable to me. And I'm even going to get rid of this one that's doing 56. And what you can see is that confidence score has already increased to high. And the reason being is because we've just shortened our gap between the lowest and the highest by like $30,000 to $40,000 there. And then on top of that, we have more than 5 comps. And so now I have a high confidence score. Should you just look at this and be like, yep, this means I'm definitely going to make that number? No, never do that and never think that that's what that means. It's just saying that you've done a good job grabbing in properties that are all relatively the same, making around the same amount of dollars. But keep in mind, I just had a whole bunch of properties in here that have pools and I technically don't have an in-ground pool. And so these aren't super comparable to my property as it is today, but yet it's saying that I have a high confidence score. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't know for a fact how comparable it is to the property you're looking at. It's just saying you've done the right job of adding 5 and they're close together. Okay. With that being said, we now have added on all these comps and we've decided that these are our best comps that we want to see. We moved around the map. We hunted for the best possible comparable properties. We've done our job. And so at this point, I will now click update report, and that's going to save these new comps. And now I have a completely different projected annual revenue here. So with that being said, you've done the vast majority of what you were probably going to do with the Rentalizer tool. And I just want to, applaud you and congratulate you for not just looking at the number that they had here and saying, yep, that's what I'm going to make. And instead, you did a little bit of extra work. You moved around the map. You found some more comps. You used some filters. You added them in. You got rid of the bad ones. And now you have a more accurate projection of what your property could potentially make. With that being said, all right, with that being said, keep in mind that these properties, the worst one's doing 78 and the best one's doing 159. And so in reality, there's still this gigantic difference, and all that they're doing here is just grabbing the middle number for the most part. For the most part, they're grabbing probably the medium or the average, or whatever it is. They're just pulling that number in, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to make $100,000, because in all reality, there's one, two, I believe there's three comps in here. One, two. I thought that this is showing the revenue. The revenue potential for this one is 118. So there's three properties that are doing $120,000 a year. And if I were to be looking at that, I would consider that to be like my best case scenario. And so then therefore, even though it's telling me that there's, $100,000 is what they expect that I can make, I actually kind of think in back of my head that there's potential to get to 120. However, with that being said, I also know that there's a potential for me to get down to 80,000. And so I'm not just using one number, I'm using three numbers. I'm using a low and all the way to a high. And as you can see here, this is what I've always done with my forecasting. I'll forecast a low scenario, a mid scenario, and a high scenario. And so when I look at this number here, to me, it's just the mid. And I think that there's potential to do more. There's potential to do worse, but they're just going to use that number as that main number when you're looking at it. Okay. So with all that being said, well, what are these other features that are here? How can I use them? Are they useful? What are my thoughts on them? Things like that. So let me just kind of walk you through. I'm going to start off with the revenue projection because this one's pretty straightforward. This is going to give you your sort of seasonality, sort of like when you're going to do better, when you're going to make more money. This helps you know what your cash flow is going to be. So you're going to make the majority of your money between March all the way to August, and then you maybe lose some money between November and February, but hopefully you come out ahead after all of that. The comparable amenities, I honestly have never really found this useful because there's such simple things like air conditioning, heating, internet. Everybody has this stuff, right? Especially with this type of property. So it's not going to be that helpful. You can see like we almost have 100% for most of these. And then when you go down here, you can see how has the annual projected revenue changed over time. This one I actually find super interesting. So on a month by month basis, they can tell you what this property would have been projected in December of 2024 compared to April of 2025, right? So as you can see, the projection has actually increased significantly over the past 5 months. I have no idea why, but I do find that super, super intriguing. We can see just the last 12 months. If I were to go over the past 2 years, you can see it used to be way up here. It dipped like crazy at one point. And by crazy, I mean it went down by 20,000. It's not the end of the world. And it shot back up. So clearly this market went through some sort of dip and recovery during this between 2023 and today, right? So it's an interesting little piece to look at. It's not a crystal ball of what's going to happen in the future, but just kind of showing you that as something that you can take a look at. With all this being said, there's still two features here that we got to look at, which is the financial calculator. And then we have the reports and saving reports and things like that over there, which I find kind of interesting. So for the financial calculator, what they've essentially tried to do here, if we click this button, is create an underwriting sheet of some kind that you can use. It's okay. All right. If I'm give my honest opinion, it's okay. For some reason, it's not saving in the way that I want it to save. It's making adjustments in a strange way. When I update the revenue manually, it doesn't update where over here. This stays as is. So there's a couple of tweaks, but with all that being said, I want to still show you how you could still use this if you're going to use it, and just general thoughts on it. Okay. So the rental revenue, I would say just leave it as is for now. All right. Let's say that you are going to, what you can see are all the operating costs. So management fee, cleaning fees, utilities. And what we want to do is add all this stuff in so that we can actually figure out what our true net operating income will be. And then from here, there's additional step that we can take. Okay. So the first thing we'll do is say, we're going to manage this ourselves. Let's say the lodging taxes, let's assume it's collected automatically and we don't need to collect it ourselves. So we can get rid of that. The property tax, let's assume that's 3%. Or sorry, no, for the property tax, let's go straight to the listing and scroll down. And when you scroll down through Zillow, you can get to facts and features. There's a little button that clicks show more. And then you can get all the way down here and it's going to tell you what the annual tax amount is going to be. So we got 5,500 here. And what I'll do is go back over here and just simply type that 5,500 into the dollar side rather than doing a percentage. Now, the cleaning fee, I looked this up and it seemed like the cleaning fee was roughly about $250. And let's assume that there's going to be 7 turnovers every single month and times that by 12. And that ends up being $21,000 for the year just to clean this property. It could be higher, it could be lower, but let's just put that in there. Let's assume for maintenance, you're allocating $300 a month to fix furniture and anything that kind of breaks slightly there. So that'll be about $3,600 for the year. Let's assume your insurance is about $200 a month. So we're at $2,400 for the year. Let's assume your utilities, because I'm going to get a pool, which needs a pool heater, and I'm going to get a hot tub, which is going to need its own thing as well. So let's assume that my utility bills is $500 a month. Let's just overestimate. So we're looking at $6,000 for a year there. We got to check to see if there's an HOA fee, which we can see. There is one at $24. So 24 times 12 is 288. And then other. So this is, they don't want to add so many things that it's too much. But I just want to point out that the other things you should be considering are things like the internet, pest control, hot tub maintenance, outdoor landscaping, softwares that you're going to have to use, shampoo supplies, stuff like that to keep the property going. So all those things you want to consider as well. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume that all that stuff could add up to about $500 a month or $6,000 for the year. Now, I'm going to leave all of this here because it doesn't seem to be really doing much other than just changing what the purchase price is. For some reason, it didn't come through as the $960,000 that is up for. So I'm going to make that adjustment because that'll change some things for me here. And this one, for some reason, the property tax does get a little screwy. So keep an eye on that if something seems off. Click save. And now what we can see, let me just make sure that everything still came through the way we wanted it to. Seems like it. Okay, so we're going to click save. And what we can see is that we have a net operating income of $56,000 if the property would make $100,000 a year. Now, at this point, okay, what does this mean, net operating income? This is what it's going to cost you to run this Airbnb, everything other than the principal and interest that you're going to have to pay. And so what I would recommend is at this point, just open up a mortgage calculator that you can find online. Bank of America has a pretty straightforward one. Put in the information of what your loan should be. And what you can see here, our monthly principal and interest is going to be just over $5,000. Okay. So what does that mean at the end of the day? Well, we have leftover money after paying all of our operating expenses, which works out to $44,000. We have leftover money. Sorry, I said that backwards a second ago, but this is the remaining money to pay for the principal and interest. This is our operating expenses. So the remaining money is $56,000. Well, if we take $5,000 and times it by 12, that's going to work out to $60,000. Meaning that if this property were to make $100,000 and we were to buy it with a 20% down at just regular rates, this isn't even considering like a debt DSCR loan, and we're just using this number here, this property will lose $4,000 a month because it's going to cost $60,000 to pay for the principal and interest. We only have $56,000 left over. Therefore, we're going to lose about $4,000 a year. So losing $4,000 a year if it were to make this amount. Does it still make sense to move forward with this property? Maybe, because maybe you're okay with it slightly breaking even because maybe you took advantage of the STR tax loophole and you saved a ridiculous amount of money. And maybe you really, really, really do think you can get it to 120. And so then therefore the property will make about $15,000 to $20,000 a year in cash flow. You saved a bunch of money in taxes. Maybe it's in a good market where it's appreciating. And so then therefore you think it's a good property. I don't know. I don't really care. Based off of your situation's your situation. I've learned that everybody has a different scenario. And so then therefore, I'm just trying to show you that that's how you could use this, right? Lastly, you can come over here and click Save Report. And when you save it, you can go over to the Rentalizer dashboard. And what you'll see is it's been saved. Now, I've saved this 4 times now, but it's saved as number 3. Okay, so it's my 3rd time saving this. All of those comps are going to be saved. One thing I have noticed is that this all gets reset. So for whatever reason, this doesn't save, just kind of calling that out right now. But the next thing you can do, and this is for people who are, maybe raising money to be able to buy properties or doing joint venture deals or something along those lines, or probably even useful for getting loans, I would assume, but I don't know for a fact because you are customizing the comps yourself, which maybe they don't want you to do. So it comes up with this report. It's a clean looking report. It's not telling you a lot. It's, you can't look at the individual listings, obviously, because it's just a PDF, but it's not like hyperlinked out to be able to look at the property. It just brings you back. Oh, look at that. It is hyperlinked. I take that back. That was pretty cool. So with all that being said, I mean, that's pretty well it. You can actually finally go and customize comps, get and scroll around using filters to get the best possible projected revenue. And thanks to that, you can, technically figure out your annual revenue quicker than if you were to do it the other way. With that being said, you know what? You know what is an advantage? I actually have, the whole time I've been doing this, all I've been thinking about is like, if I were to actually go to this market and create my own sort of like boundaries and comp set and areas, I could probably get to the answer a little bit quicker. But you know what I can't do very easily or as easily is create this entire comp set to have in here and be able to kind of shuffle around and find those comp sets, and also like keep them sort of organized really nicely and be able to make sure I'm using the filters and make sure that I can go back and forth and be able to scroll through this as well. So you know how AirDNA has those different like zones, and you got to go from one submarket to the next submarket and kind of bounce around. This just allows you to scroll, right? You're just like scrolling endlessly if you want to think that something's comparable to yours or not. And so that's a super cool feature. So this is actually quite nice in comparison to some of the other stuff. I do recommend that you click this learn more button so you can truly understand what the confidence score actually means. And I think that's it. I really think that's it. That's everything there. There's a couple of updates that probably need to happen to the financial calculator. The tool came out, not too long ago, like very, very recently. But all in all, I am happy. I am very happy that AirDNA has invested time into improving this. And I cannot stress this enough, guys. Please, please do not just take the projected revenue as gospel and go and buy a property based off of this. I can't tell you how many people I have talked to where they have done that and have completely screwed up. I've talked to one person where they thought the property would make $300,000 a year, but like best case scenario was going to be $200,000 a year. And that a difference was a really, really big deal for that property. And so please do not just take that as gospel. Do a little bit of extra legwork like I just showed you today. And I'm going to leave an additional video that you can go through here to learn how to comp even more strategically and become really, 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 really good at forecasting annual revenue for Airbnb so that you can go and find great deals. All right. Hope you'd enjoyed this. Comment anything down below that I missed that you thought I did wrong. And maybe I can make a follow-up video to talk about that a little bit more. Enjoy.